What do you think are some of the values we grew up with in our small town or our church that helped you when you were younger or as you were growing into adulthood?
Being an athlete, I also ran cross country and track in high school. I wasn't really worried about the physical part.
What a typical day would be like, and how does that differ from, say, when you're a freshman versus a senior?
And I think that was by far one of the more challenging 2 years of my career.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to my new podcast, Not Your Parents' America, because let's face it, this place has changed a ton over the past several decades, especially over the last 10 years. On this podcast, we're going to talk about all kinds of challenges that Americans are facing, such as the housing crisis, the economy, the rise of artificial intelligence, social media, and much more. And also, there's growing civil discourse between American citizens and also between citizens and our government. I know, it sounds a bit heavy, right? Even for me. And I'm your host, Shelley, and I invite you to stick with me with this because we're going to go on a journey together where we meet regular Americans who are committed to getting us out of this mess. You know, it's not going to be the tech bros or the billionaires or the celebrities who help us out if we get in a crisis. It's likely going to be the guy or the gal who's next door to you or somebody who lives in your community. And the chances are high that that person may be of a different race, culture, religion, or political party than you. So I think it's time we all started talking. And on this show, it is my hope that I will bring you thoughtful guests who are going to give us some bit of knowledge, either in a life experience they've had or their job. So grab a snack and your favorite beverage, and let's get started. All right, my first guest is a friend of mine that I grew up with in high school, and we went to the same church. Her name is Ginger Wallace, and she and I grew up in a small rural community in Kentucky. And when I say small, I mean really small. There were 9,000 people in our town, one stoplight, and one fast food restaurant. And on the weekends, for fun, we did things like go to the high school football or basketball games, or maybe do something with our Baptist church youth group. I know, it sounds really exciting. And you know what? There was a lot of really great things about it. Ginger escaped this town, though, when she was at the age of 18. And she went to a place known for the Mile High City and the Garden of the Gods. That's right, for all you state trivia people, she went to Colorado. However, Ginger was not there sampling craft beers, hiking, and biking as most do. No, she was enrolled at the prestigious Air Force Academy, where she graduated in 4 years with a degree in psychology. She played basketball, and then she went on to serve her country for maybe around 30 more years, achieving status of colonel. And she's going to tell us more about all of that and some of her assignments later. And since 2017, she's been retired, in quotes. This woman has not been sitting around on her butt watching Netflix and eating bonbons. No, she has been out in her community volunteering and also working for social organizations. So I hope that you will help me give a warm welcome to my guest, Ginger Wallace. Hi, Ginger.
Hi, Shelley. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited. All right, well, we're going to start with your time at the Academy and the Air Force because I think that is a subject that a lot of people are fascinated with. And I was just wondering, so how did you get the idea to go to the Academy? And what was the onboarding process to get into that?
So it's an interesting story, really. So we went on a family trip. In fact, we went on family trips together.
Yes.
On occasion.
Yes.
So we were on a family trip out to Colorado. I was in the 6th grade. And one of the places we were going to go in Colorado was the Air Force Academy. And if I took you there today, I could show you where I stood and said, this is where I'm going to go to college someday.
Oh, my
in the sixth grade.
I had no idea. It's so beautiful.
It is absolutely gorgeous. And then fast forward to junior and senior year, because you start the process in your junior year to be accepted to the academy. We had a good family friend who was the liaison to the academy. And he said, hey, he told my dad, I think Ginger should apply. And so my dad actually, and I was going through the application process, and then my dad actually put together a highlight tape of my basketball games. Just pulled tidbits, obviously, where I played well, when I didn't play well, and put that together and sent it out there. And so I ended up getting accepted, getting a nomination, and going out there to, I was hoping to play basketball. Well, technically wasn't really recruited.
Okay.
But, and you don't really get some athletes do get recruited, but you have to make the team. Every year you had to make the team. So they brought a lot of athletes in to basic training, hoping they might keep 4 or 5, because so many people left during basic training that you had to bring in more than spots you had on the team.
Okay.
So you had to make the team each year, especially that freshman year. So I just felt so lucky to end up making the team and playing 4 years.
All 4 years.
All 4 years.
I did not know that. Yeah.
I played all 4 years. I was captain my senior year.
So that does kind of lead me to one of my next questions, which was I do want to talk about every year and kind of what you go through and the differences. But I did have a question about, were you scared to go all the way out there by yourself? Were you scared at all about, well, like you said, a lot of people left for after basic training. Were you scared about the physical rigor of it, or the intellectual parts? And also, were you scared about military service after?
I think you don't know what you don't know, right? Until you're there and you experience it. So being an athlete, I also ran cross country and track in high school. I wasn't really worried about the physical part. Okay. That didn't really scare me. Basic training actually was, I wouldn't say it was fun, but it was exciting because you're learning all these new things. You're learning, so it very much appealed to me. It was when we started the school year, and I had to, so a lot of people probably don't know, you graduate from the Air Force Academy with a Bachelor of Science degree, no matter your major. Okay. Because you have to take, your core classes are so heavy in engineering and math, and that is for every single student. And so, you and I graduated a year apart from our high school. Right. Like you mentioned, in a very rural part of the state, and I was not prepared at all. I did not, our high school curriculum at the time did not prepare me for what I faced there from an academic standpoint. Yeah. So it helped, and my parents were both educators, so I spent a lot of my time giving my father feedback, who ended up being superintendent of schools, on how, just saying, Dad, some changes got to happen. Right. This, and in hindsight, every service academy has a preparatory school where you spend 1 year. Okay. If you feel you're not quite ready. And in hindsight, I should have probably gone to the prep school, because I did really struggle academically my first 2 years. Yeah. Especially my freshman year. Yeah. But I made it. Yeah. So. Yeah. Same for me. I didn't go anywhere nearly as hard as you, but I think a hard school for Kentucky. And I felt the same, not quite as prepared as, say, the kids from Louisville, the bigger cities. It's very different today. Our high school, I think, our school system in general, I think, is fantastic. Oh, okay. I really do. That's good to know. I really do. That's really good to know. It's come a long way. I think just, again, there's so much prestige and mystery around, the academies. I think it would be fun for the listener to hear what a typical day would be like. And how does that differ from, say, when you're a freshman versus a senior? So a typical day when you're a freshman is you woke up probably around 5 o'clock. You did some kind of physical exercise. Okay. Something you then had to be out in the hallway, ready to recite knowledge to the upperclassmen prior to going to breakfast. Okay. And you just stood in the hallway until it was time for morning meal formation. And if someone came by and asked you a question, you were expected to answer it. And we had a book of knowledge that we were responsible for. So they could ask us really anything. And you learned it each week. Like you had a specific set of knowledge you were supposed to learn each week, and they could ask you anything. Then you went to breakfast.
Okay.
We had morning meal formation. You went to breakfast. You then had your academic classes. You had noon meal formation, where you had to come out.
What's meal formation?
Noon meal formation is, so there are 40 squadrons
Okay.
at the academy. So the academy's nickname is the Zoo. Because I don't know if it still is today, but it used to be the #1 tourist attraction in Colorado. So every
beautiful.
noon meal formation where the chapel is at the Air Force Academy, there would be people lined to watch us march into Mitchell Hall,
okay.
which was our dining facility. So every squadron formed up in formation, and then you had a little ceremony, and then you marched in to Mitchell Hall, where you all sat down, all 4,000 cadets sat down together, had lunch. But as freshmen, you ate at attention. So, and
Gosh.
I mean, literally you were,
I cannot imagine this.
you were only allowed so many chews per bite. It was very, very rigorous, right? Then you went back to class. In my case, after one period in the afternoon, I went to practice because I was an intercollegiate athlete.
Okay.
Other cadets would go to intramurals. You either did your intercollegiate athletics or intramural athletics every day.
Okay.
That was something you had to do every day.
Something.
Had to do something every day. And then the evening meal was a little more relaxed because there was no formation. You just went to dinner kind of on your own.
Thank goodness.
Right?
And you probably look forward to that.
And then you studied and you went to bed and then did it all again the next day. But as a freshman, anytime you were moving from one location to another, you were on either marble strips or always on the right-hand side of the hall. And always at attention, unless you were inside the classroom or down on the athletic fields. When you were moving, you were walking at attention, squaring your corners, all of that, your whole freshman year.
Okay. Are you dressed differently so that people know? Or they just know because of
they just know by what you're doing,
moving.
how you're moving. Yes, everyone wore the same. There was a uniform of the day.
Yeah.
So you all looked the same.
Yeah.
But they knew you because of the way you were moving.
Yeah. Wow. So how many people are in each class approximately?
On average, about 1,000.
Okay.
About 1,000. I think that we only had 970 in our class, the class of 1990. But the classes average about 1,000.
And I'm going to touch on this more later, but do you know about what percent were women in your class?
My class was about 10%.
Oh, wow. I actually thought it was going to be higher.
It was about 10%.
Okay.
Now,
That's
it might have started a little bit higher, but by the time we graduated, it was about 10%. I think today, and don't quote me on this, but I think they're around 15, 16% usually.
Oh, okay. All right.
Women. On occasion, maybe
as
higher.
much as I would have thought.
Well, and I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, because it just, I was in medical school, and I think about 50% of our class was women. So that's a big difference. Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to move into, and I'm just going to read for the listener just a few of your things that you did during your military career, and then we're going to talk about those a little bit. Just because these just sound like so much responsibility. I was so impressed. I was actually kind of just bowled over when I read your resume, but I'll just read these. So the first one says, this was the last 2 years of your service, Chief of Intelligence Surveillance and Reconnaissance Forces Headquarters. You were responsible for the development and career management of more than 20,000 total Air Force intelligence professionals. Not intimidating at all. The second one says, Assistant Commandant, Defense Language Institute Foreign Language Center, and that was about a 2-year period. The job description is directed foreign language training education for 44,000 DoD personnel annually in 89 languages and 31 sites worldwide, led over 2,500 military, civilian, contractor faculty providing training and proficiency, and she was in charge of a $313 million budget. My goodness. Okay, number 3, Director of Operations, Plans and Training, Force Reintegration Cell in Afghanistan. The job description here is developed and executed the Afghanistan government's peace and reintegration program policy with their security ministries. And there was one more that just sounded, again, sort of like intimidating to me. A 2-year period where you were in Florida and directed operations for a selectively manned organization delivering real-time direct threat warning and enhanced situational awareness to Air Force Special Operations Command. Wow. I mean, like I said, I've known you since we were 5, and I read this and I'm like, I had no idea. So that being said, and there was other things on this list that I didn't say, but that being said, like, what was maybe one of your more challenging responsibilities, or something that you're really proud of, or something that you really loved? If you just want to tell us about that.
So you mentioned my time out in Monterey at the Defense Language Institute as the assistant commandant. And I think that was by far one of the more challenging 2 years of my career. And I say that because most of the time in the military, you're in charge of military personnel, right? I mean, in my case, airmen. But one of my responsibilities as assistant commandant was to manage the faculty at the Defense Language Institute, 90% of whom were native speakers of the languages that they were teaching. So you can imagine all those cultures, right? Because language and culture obviously go together.
Right.
All those cultures, come together, and then you put the military in charge of them. And it was one of the most fascinating, dynamic experiences I've ever had. And they were civilians. Okay, they're civilians. So very different leading civilians than leading airmen. And so I found it fascinating. I spent my 2 years there. When I got there, I realized we had a pay deficit for our teachers, for our instructors. There really hadn't been an adjustment in their pay for a long time. And so in some cases, we were hiring new teachers at on a higher pay scale than teachers who had been there like maybe 5 or 6 years. And so there was this huge deficit in pay scales.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Especially if you know how things work in the federal government sometimes.
Yes, that does happen in the federal
so
government.
So we had teachers. We had some teachers that were like renting rooms from other teachers because they couldn't afford. I mean, we're out in Monterey, California, and the cost of living is so high.
Yeah.
So I spent my 2 years there fighting to get our teachers pay raises. And it did not happen while I was there, but shortly after, it did.
Nice.
And so, and my the person that was there after me gives me credit for that.
Yeah.
He came into my position after me, my successor there. And I was proud of that. I was really proud of that because I was relentless. I mean, I was relentless. Working, coming back to the Pentagon, making sure that we were making a case for our teachers. It made so much sense to me. I was like, it was a right or wrong thing for me, right? I was like, this is the right thing to do.
Right.
I did a couple things that I probably could have gotten me fired because that's how strongly I felt about the fact that they should have better pay.
Right.
But it worked.
Yeah.
And so, but it was the most challenging, but also one of the most rewarding.
Yeah, that's and
assignments
I'm sure
that I had.
A long-term thing too, like that affects the lives of so many teachers down the road that are in those positions. So, well, that's a fascinating description actually too about all the culture stuff. I love that. One thing that I did, well, there's two things I was wondering about your time. Like I did notice in reading your resume that it seemed like that you were in very high leadership roles a lot of times for maybe a couple of years at a time. And I just wondered, is that something that you chose or is that something that you just get told to do and you just do it or just, how does that work?
That's the way the officer assignment system works.
Okay.
In the Air Force. If you are going to continue to make rank, to get promoted, then there are certain things you have to do in your career. Okay. And for the most part, that means you have to move, right? Some of those are positions that I was selected for, so I had to compete to get those positions, which means obviously, I was competing at a different location in a different assignment for the next assignment, which was, not where I was stationed. So,
Right.
so moving every 2 to 3 years as an officer was pretty standard. It's a little different on the enlisted side. They can stay longer and continue to be promoted. It's just the way our system is set up as an officer is that if you're going to continue to get promoted, you've got to compete for certain jobs. And that usually means, and some of those jobs are just 2-year assignments.
Yeah.
The one you talked about, the director of operations, is a 2-year assignment. The one I talked about, commandant, was a 2-year assignment. So that's just the way the system is set up.
And keeps you on your toes too, because
does.
you're learning something new all the time. So we did talk about that 10% of your class, 10%ish are women. And so obviously this is a male dominated culture. And I was just curious, like with all these leadership roles that you had, did you ever get any like testosterone bro pushback or anything like that?
I did. You know, a lot of times it's subtle. Yeah. Like it's, you know what I'm talking, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I do.
It's very subtle.
Yeah.
It's the way they talk to you in a meeting.
Yeah.
Or talk over you in a meeting, or constantly interrupt you in a meeting. You know, like, I mean, it's not, I don't think I experienced it. I can't remember experience it blatantly.
Right.
But you knew it was there. Like you knew why it was happening.
Right.
It was just very subtle.
Yeah.
And so you had to be very aware, and you had to shut it down.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't shut it down,
Right.
it would just keep happening.
Right.
So you had to recognize it and shut it down in a professional, right manner.
Right.
And if that didn't work, well, then you just waited till the meeting was over and pulled the individual aside and said, don't do that again.
Right. Because it's kind of like the whole thing with the bully concept.
Right.
Like, and again, I didn't really experience bullying. Like, I know that's a thing for our kids, but like, I didn't really experience anything like that until I was a professional as well. And again, when it happens, like you said, first you got to recognize it. So I think that's important for, our listeners, like acknowledge it, that it's happening to you, and then address it. Because if you don't, they will just keep on keeping on.
Yes, they will.
All right. So my last question surrounding military services, I'm going to ask you, if I plopped you down in one of the local high schools to talk to the juniors and seniors about military service, what would you advise them in terms of military service as a career? Like the pros, the cons, like what types of personalities might be best suited?
I would say, first of all, I would highly recommend it. I loved my time in the Air Force.
Yeah.
I really did. I will acknowledge that right now we're going through a tough time.
Yes.
Right. Our military is going through a very challenging time right now.
Yes.
But for the most part, your experience will be, you will be associated with some of the most professional, the smartest, the most innovative.
Yeah.
You'll be surrounded by people that want to solve problems. They want to solve complex problems. And today we're in my experience, one of the most diverse groups of people, right? That's under attack too. That's under attack too today. And I wish people could understand that in order to solve the problems we face today, especially today,
Right.
they're so complex, right? You talked about AI.
Right.
You talked about you need the different perspectives and the different thought, the different frames of reference and the way people think.
Right.
You put all that together in a room,
Right.
all that diversity, and it might be skin color. It might be male, female, right? It might be sex.
Yeah.
It might be religion. It might be, diversity takes so many forms, but it could just be diversity of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And people's backgrounds, urban, rural, you bring all those perspectives together, and it allows you to solve problems. That was my experience. And I think that is I know it's still happening today, and it's going to have to continue to happen in the future. So much of what we have today was born out of the military. It started in the military. The internet started, right, as a project in the military. And that kind of innovation has got to continue. And I know there are young people today that would just love to be a part of that. And that's what I would say to them.
Right.
Is if you're looking for ways to be involved in some of the most innovative, challenging environments, do it. Any of the branches of service, not just the Air Force.
Yeah.
I don't think that's changing, and I know that there's attempts right now to change it.
Yeah.
I hope we are just going through I know we are. We're just going through what I would consider a challenging time, but that's what I would say to them. You'll get to potentially see the world, which again, I was stationed in countries. I got to experience different cultures. It just made me a more well-rounded person.
Yeah.
And set me up. The experience of the almost 3 decades that I spent has set me up so well for what I do now.
Yeah.
Right? And it's different. You have to adjust a little bit because, again, leading in the civilian world is very different than leading in the military. But those experiences now are informing so much of what I do now.
And I love your observations about just the different, again, how, to me, the military is like a reflection of just regular society. Like there's all kinds of different people and cultures and those viewpoints are what makes us stronger. Again, if we don't have like any experience with different cultures, then we don't know how to address the problems or I don't know if there's threats or if we're competing in certain sectors, but we need everybody. And I think it's fascinating as a career. I mean, I had always told my girls, like, you guys should consider that because to your point, you get all these great, like you get to travel and you get to also, I think there's great benefits. You get so much respect.
I was going to say the benefits, if you think about your education is paid for.
Yeah.
I have 2 master's degrees that the second one especially was just an incredible experience that I had as a result of being in the military. So there are some things I think people don't think about.
Yeah.
That, the military really is trying to create well-rounded people.
Right.
Not just, people obviously think that, we blow things up and break things. And that is true when our country needs us to do that.
Right.
But anymore, it's much more, like I mentioned earlier, it's much more the complexity and
so much nuance
in the world we are experiencing today.
Yeah.
But we need it. We still need the innovation and the again, bringing all of that experience together to solve the problems that we face. So I hope people realize that diversity has a lot of different meanings.
Absolutely. It's to me, it's all good. All right. Well, let's move on to I'm going to do 2 questions kind of about where we grew up and how we were in the same church. We've known each other since we were 5. Our parents are friends. Our parents were all school teachers. I mean, at an administrative level. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot in common. Obviously, there's good and bad things about where we grew up. So let's start with the positives. Like, what do you think are some of the values we grew up with in our small town or our church that like helped you when you were younger or as you were growing into adulthood?
I mean, I think where we grew up was a great place. To me, there was such a sense of community.
Yes.
Very much a sense of community. And everyone knew each other.
Yes.
Which meant that,
good and bad.
Good and bad. Good and bad, right? There's always the nosy neighbor potentially. But that created such a sense of community where you honestly felt like you had like second moms and second dads.
Right.
And the people in your life became so much a part of your life, whether that was at church
teachers.
Or school, your coaches.
Right.
They became so much a part of your life. They really were a second family.
Yeah.
And that I would argue that doesn't happen everywhere. That doesn't happen in bigger cities.
Right.
That where you literally saw the same people everywhere.
And you had a lot of support, I think, for the most part.
Oh, you had tons of support, tons of support. People, I mean, and people genuinely wanted you to succeed.
Yes.
And were going to help you do whatever was necessary to
Yes.
succeed. Again, whether it was at church, whether it was your teachers, your coaches, it really just, that sense of community to me was so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, I just think like your class and my class, like we were lucky. I mean, we all just really got along. I mean, to me, it wasn't like, some of the mean girl movies that you see or something like that.
No, and if you think about it, like our classes, like we started kindergarten.
Yeah.
And graduated high school together.
Yeah. Yep.
We literally had one school campus, right? We had one campus.
Yeah.
The elementary, the middle school, and the high school was all on one campus.
Yeah.
So those were people that, potentially were your friends for life because you literally spent.
They still are. I mean, we still hang out with some of these people.
Right? I mean, and so I think that there's a lot to be said about that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right. So the next question, just for you, dear listener, Ginger and I did talk about this ahead of time, and it has to do with the subject of sexuality. And we wanted to bring this up because I think we both sort of agree that maybe we don't exactly agree with everything that our church taught us about certain issues. And so I will just jump right into the subject and say, I identify as a heterosexual female. Ginger, how do you identify?
I identify as a lesbian.
Okay.
I am married to another woman. I don't think you mentioned growing up, you eventually realize probably getting into high school that you're different. Mm-hmm. But in the rural community we grew up in, you're the only person you know. Yeah. And so you don't really know what it is you're experiencing.
Well, especially not back then.
Especially not back then.
Yeah,
obviously today is very different. We grew up in the
70s, 80s.
And so you didn't really know. That changed in college. Mm-hmm. And then, you mentioned our church, and then I don't think I remember it as much growing up as when I would go back.
Okay.
And sit in church, and you would listen to, very pointedly, you're going to hell. Right. I mean, I heard those words from the pulpit of the church that I'd grown up in, and that's tough to take, right? Yeah. You know inherently that you're a good person,
right?
But it takes you a while to process that.
Right.
That's not true.
Right.
I know I'm a good person. And just because I happen to love someone of the same sex doesn't mean that I'm going to end up in hell. But that was hard. That was really, really hard to reconcile and hurtful, right?
Mm-hmm.
When someone you respect is standing in the pulpit, or you thought you did, and you hear those words, it's like, but wait a minute.
And how did you reconcile that? Like, was there like certain I don't know, events or classes that you took or talks that you heard? You had a degree in psychology, so I would assume.
Well, and I think for me, it was just over time, meeting other people, knowing I wasn't alone. I'm not the only person that identifies this way or feels this way. There are other people out there. They're friends of mine. They're good people.
Yeah.
Right. And then you then start to find your community. And when you find your community, which was tough in the 90s, under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that was hard to do in the military.
I wanted to talk about that.
Because you wanted to keep your job.
Right.
So it was tough, but once you found that community, you started to realize that I'm not by myself. Mm-hmm. And there are other people out there like me. We're all good people.
Right.
Then you just knew that and you knew that they were wrong. That finally you get to the point where you're like, that person who's supposedly a person of, the cloth, the God, right, is wrong. But it didn't happen overnight.
Oh, no.
It took a long time.
Oh, I mean, like, okay.
It took a long time.
And you brought up Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because I kind of re-looked at that, like when I was preparing for this. And can you tell the listener what that was? Because it probably a lot of people don't realize.
So in 1993, I entered the Air Force in 1990. There had been a lot of witch hunts going on, trying to find gays and lesbians, right, and to kick them out of the military. There was a big push to allow people to serve openly.
Right.
President Clinton compromised. He compromised and said, we're going to put in a policy called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So we won't ask you, but you can't be out.
Right.
You can't live your life openly. As long as you don't do that, everything's fine.
Right.
So you can imagine how difficult that was, right?
Right.
I mean that's hard to do.
You hang out with these people. You're with them 24/7.
Right. And so I don't think it really. So plus you are doing what you love, right?
Right. Your work. You love your work.
You love your work. You're serving your country.
Right.
That's what you want to do.
Yeah.
And so you are going to do things that are antithetical to, right? Like I consider myself a person of integrity, but was I always honest? No. And think about putting a person in that position.
Right.
That's tough.
Because that's part of your identity.
Yeah.
Like you don't choose to love women. I don't choose to love men. It's just the way we were born.
It's the way we were born.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it didn't really hit me until I was retired how much it hurt me. I mean, I was successful, right? I mean, most people would say getting promoted to colonel was,
right.
But I think about it, I had 2 chances to command as a lieutenant colonel under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, where I could not, right? I was not out. I was not.
Okay.
All right. And then when I was out at Monterey as the commandant, I also had a second hat as an Air Force group commander.
Okay.
So 2 chances where I was out. It was post Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Okay.
And I was out. That is when I learned how important authentic leadership is.
Wow.
You and being your authentic self in a position of leadership.
Right.
I was an okay squadron commander.
Yeah.
From 2008 to 2010, but I was a much better group commander because I was myself.
Yeah.
I could be, as a squadron commander, when I said, my whole job as a squadron commander was to take care of my airmen and their families.
Yeah.
When I asked them how they were doing, right, was I really like listening? I didn't want them to ask me anything about my life because I didn't want to talk about it.
Right, because you can't.
So how can you have an authentic, genuine conversation about the well-being of people that you're in charge of when they don't know anything about you?
Right. They don't know one of the biggest parts of a person, just their identity.
And part of authentic leadership and getting people to open up to you is being vulnerable yourself. Right. You've got to say, I understand what you're going through because of this.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to be able to be genuine and authentic with them. I could not do that in all aspects of my life.
Right.
As a squadron commander.
Right.
Fast forward to 2013 to 2015, Don't Ask, Don't Tell ended in 2011. I am now out as a group commander. I could put my now wife's Jan's picture up on the screen, briefing 1,000 airmen. I had 1,000 airmen that were in under my charge as a group commander. Yeah. And I could talk about it. Right. And I could talk about my experiences that I had. Right. I had more than one airman come up to me. I now know identified as gay. I know they were identified as gay or lesbian and said, thank you. They see you. Right. And that's another thing too. Right. They now see themselves in you. Right. 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 And they know it's okay to be their authentic selves because you're being your authentic self. And that might be a small population, but if one young airman said, you know what, I feel much more comfortable now in my own skin because I just watched my group commander talk about, she wasn't my wife at the time, but I just think that, and I talk a lot now in the circles that I am in what I'm doing about authentic leadership and how important it is, authenticity is in being the most effective leader you can possibly be. Right.
Yeah. And you're blowing my mind because it's just like, I get it that Well, I just think to be the best version of ourselves, like we don't need to be living a lie, right? And it's not that you didn't choose really to be living this lie. This was just something that was imposed upon you. And I was sort of surprised again when I was reading this, because I didn't realize, because here's okay. I was sort of like you. I felt like our church said that was wrong. And somewhere in college, I figured out, that's hogwash. That's crazy. And I know transgender is kind of an issue for some people. And again, I think that's so sad because those, they're a marginalized community as it is. But I feel like most people I know don't have any problem with homosexuality. And but even I was reading, like, even until like around maybe the last few years, like some of the military spouses didn't get all the benefits. Is that true?
Right. No, that is not true. Okay. Well, once the Defense of Marriage Act ended, right, in 2015, right, then that changed everything.
Okay.
There was still, the military was still a little bit ahead of the rest of society, because they still, like, if people prior to 2015, if you went to a state to get married, like we had friends get married in California when I was out there. Okay. She was going to a military installation to take command. Her spouse got to go with her. This was pre-2015.
Okay.
Right? Because the federal government recognized that, the military recognized a marriage that happened legally in another state, right, before it happened nationally. Okay. So we were actually a little bit ahead.
Okay.
Now, but full benefits, did not happen until the Defense of Marriage Act ended in 2015.
Okay.
So,
but
that Supreme Court ruling.
Okay.
Yes. That Supreme Court ruling in 2015.
Goodness. I mean, that's just, again, but that's crazy. That's only been in the last decade.
Mm-hmm. Last decade.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's move on and we'll just kind of briefly touch on what you've been doing since you've been retired. I know you've been super busy. I'm just looking again for the listener at Ginger's resume. Some of the things she's done: she worked as Director of Development, Parks Alliance of Louisville, President Board Member, Food Literacy Project. I know you've talked about serving with an organization called Impact Women, member of Metro Louisville District 8 Advisory Council, working with Louisville Metro government to execute the first ever participatory budgeting project. It's a lot, girl. Like, did all this just fall into your lap, or how did all this happen?
Well, I mean, and I think a lot of people that serve in the military just want to continue to serve, right? Yeah. When they either leave the military, retire, whatever their circumstances. And I think for me, I have always been very cognizant of the fact that the taxpayer has literally paid my salary, my entire adult life.
Right.
Right?
Right.
The taxpayer pays my retirement, my pension.
Right.
So my whole, I want to continue to give back in a way that makes sure that I've always said this, like every day I would say, did not always happen. I did not always happen. But my challenge every day was, don't waste the taxpayer's money today.
Right. Even after you got out of service.
Well, especially in service.
Yeah.
But then I think at some point it hit me when I retired.
Yeah.
You're still beholden to the taxpayer.
Right.
Because they're paying your pension.
Right. Yeah.
So I was like, let's not waste the taxpayer's money today. Right. So just doing my part to, help make our city, a better place.
Yeah.
And whatever that entails. And there are things that I will say that our city's tough. If you didn't grow up here, it's a little tough to get in, right? If you didn't go to high school here, because high school is a thing, high school is, where'd you go to high school? Yes. And so it's a little insular.
Yeah.
And I think there's positive and negatives about that. There's some good things about that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that makes it challenging is you got to get in with where you are, right? So those organizations that you mentioned, right? I'm in the Rotary Club. I am president of our neighborhood association now. I am now president of the Food Literacy Project board, but it's taken me a while. Mm-hmm. It's taken me about, now this is my 10th year in retirement, 2026, and it's taken me almost that whole time to kind of to feel comfortable
Mm-hmm.
in the organizations that I'm in because I didn't know anybody
Right.
when I got here. I mean, I knew a couple people, but
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, I came to Louisville in 2017 and I was,
Yeah.
you know, it was like moving again in the military, right? It was just that final move, right? To a place where you don't, you know, but at least in the cases of moving in the military, you knew you were coming into an organization where you were going to work. Here, I just had to for the first couple of years, I didn't do much except, you know, clean the house and cook. Again, trying to find my way.
Right.
I
Figure
did-
out what you want to do.
Figure out what I want to do, where I want to get involved. I did join Rotary because my dad was, you know,
Yeah.
lifelong Rotarian. And, you know, we had the auction where we grew up. There's always a big deal every year to raise money
Yeah.
for Rotary. And I told him when I retire, I will join Rotary. So that's one of the first things I did. But then it was just, how can I get involved I love this city. I have fallen in love with this city. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I want
That's
it,
great.
I want it to be the best
Yeah.
version of itself. And so
Yeah.
how can I in little ways,
Right.
you know, help it be the best version of itself?
Wow, that is great. And I think that's a good segue into our next topic, which is actually the Trump of it all. And I say that it's a good segue because I feel like that, again, I know some of your jobs are like paid jobs that you've had too, but like community service in general, just when we're talking about if we're looking at the political landscape or trying to change opinions or change the narrative, again, getting involved in your local community is one of the first steps, and you are truly doing that. So, under the topic of the Trump of it all, I already know the answer to this, but you know, in future podcasts, I hope to not know. I think that'll be fun. But for the listener, are you a never Trumper, triple Trumper, other, or you want to plead the fifth?
Never Trumper.
Never Trumper. I'm a
Never.
never Trumper too.
Never.
Yeah, girl. I mean, I
No.
know we already knew this
I
about
mean,
each other, but
I really think if I wasn't already there, and I know you see this a lot now, that it should have been over when he mocked that disabled reporter.
when was that?
I want to
He
say
does
that
so
was
many
2015.
things.
That was at the beginning.
I was going to say, I've never been a fan, but
He mocked
I'll
that
tell you
disabled
mine.
reporter, and I was like, no,
yeah.
no.
Wow.
What kind of human being
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
that? I mean, I was like, I don't think I knew a whole lot about
Right.
it. I mean, because he
didn't
was Donald
either.
Trump, but I
Yeah.
didn't really know,
Yeah.
when he did that, I was like, man, no, we're done.
Well, yeah. And, you know, I think for me, like subconsciously, like the sexual comments that were made back then were terrible. And I mean, I usually vote Democrat anyway, but I will say for me where I really drew the line and became concerned was like the whole Jan 6 thing. But
Right.
That
Well,
was
that
bad.
that obviously was a red line that I honestly thought that was it. I thought
my
he's going
gosh.
to, this is obviously was an insurrection, like a real
Yeah.
insurrection.
Yeah,
Not a
yeah.
fake one, like a
Yeah.
real one. And it was obvious to anyone who watched it
yeah.
that he was behind it. So I thought
Right.
he's going to get prosecuted, and that's,
Right. Well, it's one of those moments where, I'm not saying it wasn't 9/11, obviously, but I do remember, like, it's kind of like with 9/11, I know exactly where I was, and I know exactly where I was when that happened.
So do
because
I.
I was like, oh my gosh, like we are under attack. Like I was like, what's going to happen?
Well,
Like,
and so
I was
I
like
think-
freaked out.
I think the whole time I was watching it, like, I was like, okay, they're going to go to the Capitol, but they're not going to go in it. I mean, that's not going to happen.
Right.
I mean, there's Capitol
Right.
Police.
Right.
They're not
That's
going to
so
actually
scary.
they're not actually going to break stuff
Yeah.
and break windows and get inside. That's not going to happen. I mean, with, and you're right, when it did happen, you're right. It wasn't 9/11, but it was traumatic. I mean, it was it was that kind of event
Yeah.
that you know exactly where you were, exactly what you were doing because you couldn't comprehend it.
Right.
You just like you couldn't comprehend the planes hitting the Twin Towers.
Right.
At the time, it was so there was just no way. Same thing watching it
Right.
transpire. You're like, I cannot believe
Right.
that this is happening.
It doesn't happen in this country.
No.
So obviously, yes, we are both Democrats who are concerned. And yes, I'll skip right to the big one because I definitely want to have time for you to speak about this, but what are your top few concerns about the Trump administration?
I think, I mean, there's so many. But I think the two that, and I'm going to kind of tangentially do a third one, but because this is an election year, this is the midterm year.
Yeah.
I think the two that concern me the most, the lawlessness that we've seen in Minnesota, primarily in Minneapolis, just
Right.
the way, the obvious murders that happened,
Right.
the way U.S. citizens are being treated, or people that are here illegally. I mean, they said, I think there is not a person in this country that does not want violent immigrants who are violent criminals to be removed from our country.
Right.
That
Right.
Of course we do.
Right.
Of course you do.
Right. You can remove them in a humane way.
Obviously.
I mean,
and both president, I would argue every administration, regardless whether they were Democratic or Republican prior to this one, has done it
right.
without us even knowing, because they
Yeah,
did it
like
the right
Barack
way.
Obama, the deporter in chief, which I didn't even know until
Right.
Trump took,
But they did it the right way.
right.
And so I think that concerns me, because I think they say that it's to remove, violent criminals. That's
Right.
not what it's for. It's to create chaos,
Yes.
right? To impact the midterms, to be able to either invoke the Insurrection Act or, so they're trying to entice average Americans into violence,
Right.
which so far, for the most part, I mean, the people of Minnesota and Minneapolis are just unbelievable. The way they have
The whole country
challenged it and protested it in
Right.
for the most part, a very peaceful and effective way.
Yes.
The whole country.
Yeah, we've had so many protests.
So many. And so that tied and then tied to that, but really the same is what just happened in Fulton County, where they went and took the ballots.
Yes.
Right. And that's just to try and make people question the election integrity.
Right.
I have worked multiple elections in this state.
I've always wanted to do that.
And I promise you, election fraud is not a thing.
Right.
It is not a thing.
I've always said that too.
And I would argue every state
Yeah.
is the same. The what you go through, the processes, the checks and balances, it's so secure.
Right.
And so those two tied together, because those are to impact
Right.
and this SAVE Act that's out there, that will for the most part impact a woman's ability to vote, because you have to the
Right.
name on whatever you have has to match your maiden name, right? So you have to have a passport. Making it all the things around the election is my biggest concern,
Right.
because they know they're going to lose.
I'm very worried about elections.
That
as well.
that
Very
is our way to change things, right?
Yeah.
To put a check and balance, because this Congress isn't going to do it, so we need to change Congress to check what is happening in our country, right?
Right.
So that's my biggest concern. Having a background in national security, my other biggest concern is what is happening on just overall in our intelligence community that I was once a part of. I feel like I know that there's a trust now deficit between us and countries we share
Right.
intelligence with. That's just one symptom of what is happening in that, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was in Georgia
Right.
when the ballots were taken. Just why?
Yeah.
She's the Director of National Intelligence. So what is she and our intelligence, right, apparatus not focused on
Right.
from a national security standpoint? You add to that the fact that I know that we've had intelligence sharing agreements that have been severed because there's a lack of trust, just from everything that's happening in our country, the way our allies are being treated,
Yes.
the way our NATO allies especially are being treated, has caused a lot of damage. So that worries me from an outward looking lens, and then of course the inward focus that I talked about on the elections. Those are the two biggest things
Yeah.
that concern me.
Yeah. Yes, I would agree with both of those things. Absolutely. All right. Well, we are getting towards the end of the podcast, so I'll kind of skip a couple things. We could talk forever.
We could talk forever.
Yeah.
I'm sure
we probably have.
We probably have.
Yes. On many a church retreat. obviously, yes, you have so much background with leadership and, amazing things that you've done in your career. What do you think are the top ways that we could bring this country back together?
I think right now this administration is doing it for us. If you think about what's happening, you are seeing people from very different walks of life come together to protect each other.
Yeah.
Right? Especially those that are the most vulnerable. I think that if we can, because of what is happening to people that we know, right? Especially in Minneapolis. I mean, and I go back there because that's the one that is at the forefront right now. But if you think about what they're doing to protect each other, protect kids going to school, protect people going to try to get food, protect people that are trying to get to work.
Right.
When you think about that,
Right.
that is what we can do
Right.
to get our country back. Protect each other. Protect your neighbor.
Right.
Compassion, empathy, right? I mean, Bad Bunny ended his Super Bowl with a sign that said the only thing that is greater than hate is love, something to that effect, right?
I absolutely love that.
We have to
Yeah.
look after and protect our fellow human beings. Because there are right and wrong ways of doing things. And right now we're doing a lot of things wrong. And we got to get back to doing things right. And I think if we can collectively come together and say, not I'm going to do my part to make sure that we don't lose the country that we all love.
Right.
I mean, we all love this country. It doesn't matter what you've done in your life. You, for the most part, Americans love
being an American.
Being an American.
All the privilege
we
that
love
goes
it.
with that.
We love it. We
Yes.
are the greatest country in the world.
Yes.
And I know people say, oh, is that really true? It is true. Have we been through this before, challenging times in our country? Yes, we have. But in the end, the American people came together and said no. And we all have to do just something every day that says, I love this country and I love my fellow Americans.
Right.
And we're not going to let it happen.
Right.
We're going to take our country back.
Yeah. No, I love that. I absolutely love that. Yeah, taking care of each other. I think you said it all. And I think it's a great place for us to wrap up. And I just want to say thank you, Ginger, so much for being here with me today.
Well, thank you for having me. This is fun.
You've always made me feel so comfortable. I've always looked up to you, and I have even more respect after looking at all the things that you've done. So thank you for your service, for keeping me safe at night, even when I didn't know you were doing that. And thank you to the listener for hanging in there with us on this new pod, Not Your Parents America. If you like what you see here, if you like people talking about things and caring for each other and not creating chaos and just acting the fool, please come back. Tell one of your friends, tell two of your friends, tell 10 of them about this show. I will probably start out just on YouTube, and I know a lot of you are familiar with that platform. It's really important to just like the video and subscribe. That goes a long way in boosting things in the algorithm. Again, I want to thank you for joining me and my guest today. Appreciate each of you guys. Love and peace. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.